Alright, so we are here in Interlude 1. There are 3 interludes, and each of them has you pick 2 characters to recruit out of a possible set of 5. It's inspired by Tiering Saga, where you get that choice between the 5 units, then you pick 2 of them. But here you pick them at the same time, as opposed to in Tiering Saga, you've got the Holmes and Renan split and stuff and all that fun stuff. So, this episode is going to be a pretty short one. It's just going to be Interlude 1, which means it's going to be a series of character reviews, and then I will make my choice at the end, and then we'll check in on the tier list and see where they've ended up. So let's start with a character who, it's pretty obvious that I'm not going to be choosing Gerhardt, but it's not what he's meant for, right? This is a trainee. If you had fun training Daisy, which I tend to, Gerhardt is just Daisy 2.0. So he is in the Journeyman class, which means he has the possible endpoints of either Hero, Warrior, or Berserker, going through Fighter or Pirate, depending on how you want to get there. And he has Fire Affinity, which is pretty good. His growths are okay. I tend to find that he's pretty disappointing. Like, if you're looking for payoff to the training arc, right? I don't necessarily know that it is quote-unquote worth the effort. I don't think you're going to get some sort of like uber powerful unit in comparison to if you just trained at one of the lame Axe Bros or Philip. That being said, he is probably long-term a better investment than the Youngblood plus Sojourn combo. I do think he's a worse unit, just because, you know, he starts out at a lower level, you do need to invest in him more in order to get him up to pace, and also because he is part of this Aaron versus Samson versus Samson versus Samson versus Samson situation, and as a result, by picking him, you miss out on a more competent unit. That being said, he does have a personal weapon. The Hurlbat is basically Tam's Javelin, or Tam's Harpoon, but for axes, and it is Gerhardt's personal. Which is pretty nice. You know, it's locked to 2 range, which, the same thing with Tam's Harpoon, but 90 hit, 6 might, you could do worse, right? And it's 8 weight, which means that he's not weighed down by it. Fire Affinity is nice, I guess, but the main reason you pick Gerhardt is because you trained Daisy, and you got to the end of the training arc, and you've decided, you know what, I want to train another unit. Yeah. He's fine for that. He's fun for that. Yeah, his growths are what they would expect out of a growth unit. Like, they're not, oh my god, I have 80 in everything or whatever, but he is an investment project. And if you invest in him, you'll get something. Personally, I think that the fact that he is part of the route choice, right? Part of the Aaron versus Samson versus Samson versus Samson versus Samson, so you have that opportunity cost for picking him. And the fact that, like, he's worse than Daisy even if they joined alongside each other, just because no Cavalier access, generally worse stats. His personal weapon, even though it comes earlier, is worse than hers. I tend to think he's kind of a meme, honestly. I enjoy using Gerhardt, but I think he's one of the lower tier units in the game. And of course, you know, at the moment he has 0 growth, so we won't be picking him for our army. No, we will not. Kim is the first potential Cavalier in the game. And, well, I guess Daisy is technically the first potential Cavalier in the game. Kim is the second potential Cavalier in the game. The second actual Cavalier in the game. Or I guess only potential, because you might not choose her. All of the non-Daisy Cavaliers have some significant issues holding them back, and the biggest thing holding Kim back is her offenses are fucking abysmal. 6 strength and 6 speed are pretty bad for this point in the game, and both her strength and speed growths they're just not up to snuff, right? That being said, she does still have 7 movement, which is nice, Canto, which is nice, and Kim has a legitimate niche in 8 resistance, 12 defense, 26 HP. Kim is incredibly bulky, and she's like got mixed bulk in a way that is extremely rare for this game. Most units tend to either have very good magical bulk or very good physical bulk, but not both. And, you see Fernandez with his 0 resistance, but nigh unkillable physical bulk. Although, it's starting to fall off now, but I digress. Kim having mixed bulk is a trait that is fairly unique to her. And as a result of that, and the fact that despite being really bulky, she's not technically armored, she can frontline in a lot of places where your other tanks can't. If you have any generals or great knights who you would want to take on either a group of mixed enemies, or there's an enemy that has like a hammer in it or an armor slayer in it or something, Kim can sort of take on that group and not die. That being said, the enemies won't die either. That is the biggest downside to Kim, is like, you don't really make much progress using her, and sometimes that can be helpful if you're just like, you're trying to hold off a wave, or you just need to chip a little bit and she doesn't take much encounter. That can be fine, but I tend to think that of the Cavaliers, like, I don't know, all of the Cavaliers are disappointing in different ways, and we'll talk about them as we get to them. It's nice that she has an actual niche, but she feels so bad to use, just because of how tragic her offenses are. And she's gonna get doubled by a lot of things as well, which does eventually start cutting into her bulk. I don't think Kim is particularly good as a long-term unit. Just not really the investment project that you would think an early Cavalier is. First Cavalier, potentially. Maybe you've got Daisy by now. But either, even if you do, she's level 8, right? So she's definitely closest to being your first Paladin. And, I guess the level 8 is a bit of a downside too, because it means she's gonna gain experience slower. And so if you do want to try to salvage her pretty lackluster stats, there's a lot more investment to even just roll the dice on that, which is disappointing. Now, it does mean she's only 2 levels away from promoting, but Kim does not feel like the sort of person who you spend your first Master Seal on. Like, if you early promo Kim, then you get a mediocre unit who is also short-term. I think that there are better uses of the first Master Seal. Either, you give it to one of the early game people who you've trained a bunch, or you give it to someone who you want to be a good short-term unit, even though, long-term they won't be great. Which kind of brings us naturally to Vector. Vector is a level 19 Myrmidon, which is incredibly funny. 9 strength is not great, but 12 speed, he's gonna double quite a few things. Not everything that you would like him to, but he's going to double quite a few things, and if he gets promoted, suddenly he is, in the short term, better at doing the Killian job than Killian. He's slightly bulkier, he has mixed bulk, but, not to the degree that Kim does. 22 HP is a little bit sad, but this defense, you could do worse than this, right? Like, he's only got 3 less defense than Kujia's base. He's not meant to be like a frontliner super bulky guy, but him being bulkier than Killian is notable because they kind of want to do the same thing. Vector is a delete button. Like, he's a pre-promoted Swordmaster, in disguise as a Myrmidon. You don't pick Vector if you don't plan on using the first Master Seal on him. And you get the first Master Seal, I believe, next map? It's either in a village or dropped by the boss, I can't remember which. But Vector is pre-promote in disguise. Or I guess build your own pre-promote. The downside of Vector is that if you're not planning on using the first seal on him, kind of a throwaway pick. Because you do have to leave 3 of the units behind, and so if you just have him as a Myrmidon, he's pretty much worse than Killian. Unless you want his inventory, which I haven't really talked about, but sometimes there is the pick of, I pick this unit not because I think the unit is particularly good, but because I think their inventory is particularly good. And Vector's Blade is an A rank sword with 80 critical. So you can basically guarantee a crit with this thing. Now, it only has 10 durability, but it's not unique to Vector. So, if you are hyper-investing in a sword unit, perhaps you want another 10 delete button uses with Killian, Vector's Blade is more than capable of doing that. It is only 10 durability, which is unfortunate, and it is the only item in his inventory. Well, I guess he has a vulnerary, but like, oh no, a vulnerary, woohoo. But yeah, this is another benefit to picking him. Now, it's not something I give him credit for as a unit, but it is something to bear in mind when making the decision between the 5 units. And I guess Kim's inventory, it has a Killer Lance and a Light Rune, which is mostly money, although I can see niche situations where Light Runes come up. Light Runes are fun to use, even though they're not great. As far as Vector as a unit, being like a short-term unit that is really resource hungry, like when I say really resource hungry, it's not that he needs a lot of resources, he needs one specific resource, the first Master Seal, or he's not worth using. So it really is just a matter of like, do you want a unit who will temporarily be better than Killian until Killian gets the bread knife? And if so, are you willing to spend a Master Seal on him? And the answer to that question will, of course, just depend from player to player, team to team, playthrough to playthrough. I've used him even outside of 0% growth playthroughs, and I wasn't disappointed, but that's because I knew what I was getting, what I was going in for, right? Like, I didn't think I was picking out a long-term member of the team. I wanted someone to help out a little bit. Also, Vector's baldness is portrayed as, like, it just makes his hair skin color, and I think that's very funny. He didn't get, like, a custom sprite or anything. Speaking of inventory, and we got the Killer Lance on Guru. Guru is more than just a Killer Lance. We do eventually get a soldier who's just a Killer Lance, but Guru is more than just a Killer Lance. Guru actually has pretty decent combat stats. He's the unit who I alluded to in the previous map when we were talking about Sonvia. Guru kind of just, like, strictly outclasses her. If we want to compare the two of them, he is faster, stronger, and bulkier with the exception of she has 1 point of resistance. He is also, I believe, the same level, yeah, so... Is he faster, actually? He's 9 speed compared to her 7. Yeah, he is faster. So, in just about every way, he is better than her. His offensive stats are also pretty good, both in terms of, like, his bases being a 9-10 for strength and speed, are decent for the time, and his growths are not terrible. I think that he ends up just sort of slotting into a lot of armies. If you're not looking for a hard carry, but you're looking for a solid role player, he can kind of do that. He is, it's tempting to be like, oh, soldier all around average. And average tends, like, balanced, quote unquote, tends not to be great in Fire Emblem, but he doesn't really have any notable downsides. I guess he's not as bulky as perhaps some of the other units that we've talked about, Fernandez, for example, Kim, for example, but it's not like he's going to fall over to a stiff breeze. Like, 6 defense is fine at this point in the game, and his defense growth, while not phenomenal, like, he'll keep up to an extent, and then, much like many Call of the Armor units, he will eventually bow out and get replaced by someone stronger, unless you want to, like, be incredibly based and just roll up with 5 halberdiers. Yeah, I think Guru is mostly fine. The biggest downside to Guru is that you're picking him instead of some other units. And not even that he's necessarily strictly worse than the other units in this choice. It just feels bad to pick a guy who doesn't really have anything special about him. Like, he's just a combat guy. Doesn't feel like he's filling any sort of special niches. I guess Halberdier does get the crit bonus, which is nice, but as opposed to, like, we've got everyone else feels special to an extent. Gerhardt is a trainee. Kim is a cavalier, which is always good. Vector is build your own pre-promote. And the last unit, Lewin, is a monster and is also a pre-promote. So you're choosing the growths unit over the pre-promotes, but you're not choosing the trainee. It's weird. He's in this weird spot where, like, he is technically a better unit than Gerhardt, by a pretty significant degree, but he feels more out of place because Gerhardt knows what he is. Gerhardt knows I'm a trainee. I'm not supposed to be a great unit. I'm an investment project and the reward is training me. Guru kind of doesn't. He's like, he's sort of torn between a bunch of pre-promotes you could pick instead of him, or a better training project. I guess kind of held up on soldier meme status. A lot of people consider, like I've said it before, I think soldier bias is a stronger force than waifu bias. People are more likely to give favoritism to soldiers than they are to cute girls. And honestly, I mean, I can see it sometimes. I like Soldier and Code of the Burger King, for example. But I guess that is the appeal that he has, and him being pretty serviceable is, it's a benefit, right? You know, like, his combat is appreciated for a time, and if you are okay with just having a guy who sticks around and then eventually leaves, to get replaced by a different guy who's short-term, you know, sort of the thing that 0% growth ends up doing, Guru is, you could do worse than Guru. You could also do better, but you could do worse. The last unit we have here is Lewin, and I haven't actually used Lewin in any growths playthroughs, so a lot of this is a little bit speculation rather than experience, but I do think from looking at his stats and growths that I can get a general idea. Her, I think. Gorgons are usually female, right? So looking at her stats and her growths, I can get a general expectation. Lewin is a pre-promoted magic user, so she has 6 movement, which is promoted infantry move, so it's not like, I always feel like they're supposed to have mounted movement, like Gorgons, because, you know, they're monsters, they're half snake, and the centaurs, which are half horse, have mounted movement, but I guess snakes aren't technically a mount. So yeah, Lewin is basically just druid under another name. She has 5 magic, which is pretty sad. At this point in the game, I mean, Kazuna has a better magic base, and Kazuna's your only magic user at this point in the game, but presumably you've invested in her a little bit, and she'll end up being even more outclassing in terms of magic. This is made up for a little bit by the fact that Lewin has 13 speed at base. Being a pre-promote and having not the greatest of growths, Lewin is not really an investment target. She's more of a, this is a pre-promote, right? But she's a pre-promote with a number of pretty noticeable flaws. Her bulk it's pretty bad. 2 defense is just not where you want to be. 26 HP, like, she's definitely better than Daisy in the bulk department, with the fucking 18 HP, 0 defense, but yeah, it doesn't feel great, and yes, I do know that mages tend to be frail, and I don't want to discount her entirely for that, but you're choosing between her and some units who have, like I said that Vector ends up not being super bulky, and he has 5 more defense than her, and is also, you know, able to gain speed off of promoting, and end up being, like, he's almost as fast as her at base, and if you give him a seal, then he ends up being, or no, he doesn't gain speed on promo. For some reason, FE8 Swordmasters don't gain speed on promo, which is cringe, but he's almost as fast as her. So that point remains, at least. Now, of course, hitting on resistance and doubling it's a good combination, right? It's the fact that she will double people who Kazua will not can help to supplement her damage output. She also comes with the only copy of Stone in her inventory, so if you want to do a, like, I'm making this pick just for inventories, you can do worse than Stone. You can do better, like Stone is only 5 durability, but I don't know, Stone is a cool spell. It's 3 range and has the option to petrify. I think that's kind of neat. Overall, Lewin is, I think she's fine. Much like I said with Vector, much like I said with Guru, she's a unit who you pick and you don't think she's going to be in your army long term. I do say that upon realizing that you get 2 new mages in the next chapter, and then an additional new mage the chapter after that, her appeal of being, like, the second magic user, ends up sort of, it kind of works against her, right? she no longer feels special because, oh, I don't have anyone else other than Kjua who can hit on resistance, right? And she's going to be fast and she's going to double people, right? You get some other mages who can double very, very soon afterwards. So, yeah, I think the biggest benefit to picking her is Stone. It's not that she's not good. 14 skill is also quite nice in terms of helping to make up for the hit deficiencies that Dark Tomes can face. You know, you can help her actually hit things with Stone, for example. It does kind of suck that she is a promoted unit, so she's not really going to be gaining experience and leveling up as much as you would expect her to. And you can't promote her to gain staff. She's always just going to be an offensive unit. Most of the other mages in the game, in fact, most promoted magic classes have access to staves. I struggle to think of one in GBA that doesn't. Summoner has staves, Druids has staves, Mage Knight and Valkyrie have staff, Bishop have staff, yeah. So Lewin being a pre-promoted mage that doesn't have staff access is just another mark against her. I think that the only reason you would really take her is if you are really desperate for another, like, taking her doesn't necessarily mean putting her on your team, right? If you want the stone, you probably take Lewin. And maybe don't even put her on your team. I don't think she's, like, terrible. She's very usable. It just feels, she feels inferior, I guess, to the other options you have for mages. Yeah, that is the biggest thing. The speed is a nice benefit. The speed is definitely a nice benefit. The lack of bulk, even for a mage, this bulk is not where I want it to be. Not where I would want it to be. But yeah, with all of that out of the way, I'm going to take a moment to consider my options. And we will recruit 2 units, and then we'll check in on the tier list. So I think I have decided to recruit Vector and Kim. However, I am, Lewin was very, very close second choice. And I'm not entirely sure that Lewin isn't the correct choice over Kim. His speed is faster than any of the other magic users, so he'll double some people they can't. At least for a while. My biggest thing is that Kim is a Cav. Like, I don't have Daisy, right? I don't have a Cav Daisy. I think Kim is going to, at the very least, be relevant for rescue dropping. Kim also has just a better inventory. I'm going to stagger my saves because I'm a little bit worried that I made the wrong choice. But join me next time to reclaim the ship.